I'm really happy to be working with Multi-Faith Voices for Peace and Justice. I want to thank them for taking the lead on this, the Unitarian Church for making this space available. And in my few brief minutes today, I want to, anniversaries, this is the anniversary of the start of the war in Iraq. We still have 2 wars going on and a 3rd one apparently starting. And the idea of anniversaries gets me on thinking about remembering and forgetting. And I'm glad you're all here to help remember. 8 years ago, the Peace and Justice Center organized the protests against the coming war in Iraq, and 5,000 people marched through the streets of Palo Alto. That number has dropped off by about 4,900 as we check in on this 8th anniversary. So I thank you for remembering and not forgetting. And I think it's important that we remember the lessons of Iraq and the lessons of Afghanistan as we turn on our televisions and see the scrawl across the bottom of the screen that says America's newest war. And so I want to take my few minutes to talk about what's going on in Libya in terms of what we may have forgotten about Iraq and Afghanistan. First of all, let's be clear that what is happening in Libya is not a humanitarian intervention. It is not a no-fly zone. We're not a traffic cop in Libya. The United States is engaged in a war against yet another Arab Muslim country. It is a war when you start blowing up assets on the ground, when you start blowing human beings off of roads who are in tanks and military carriers. This is war. I don't happen to believe in humanitarian intervention. I don't think it's possible. Not when modern warfare shows us that 80% of the victims are civilians. You cannot protect civilians by going to war. It's a contradiction in terms. Much has been made of the fact that the Arab League asked the United States and the Western world to come in and impose this no-fly zone and protect the civilians. That didn't last very long. As of this afternoon, the Arab League is rethinking what they've asked. Amr Moussa, who was so instrumental in the democratic revolution in Egypt and who is also president of the Arab League, said this today: "What is happening in Libya differs from the aim of imposing a no-fly zone. What we want is the protection of civilians and not the shelling of more civilians." They've been appalled by the level of violence that the United States has come in with. 110 cruise missiles is not a humanitarian intervention. There are people in those neighborhoods. As the focus of this attack centers more and more on Tripoli and Muammar Gaddafi himself, it is inevitable that there will be massive civilian casualties because it's a large, modern city. Civilians are going to die in huge numbers. They already are. We just don't know how many. I have 2 main concerns about this so-called humanitarian intervention. One is that I have spent my entire adult life trying to struggle against this concept of the United States as the one indispensable nation, the sole remaining superpower. I've been trying to struggle against the idea that it is okay for the United States, because we, the taxpayers, pay for this massive firepower, that we can project it anywhere we want around the world, whenever we want. By supporting something like this intervention in Libya, we are saying that's okay. Maybe this time is a little different, but it's okay that we're projecting US firepower one more time somewhere else in the world against a country that has not threatened us, has not attacked us. And I don't care that the United Nations said it was okay or the Arab League invited us in. This is our country attacking another country. We should have something to say about it. We're paying for it. We're paying for it, by the way, to the tune of, starting yesterday, $300 million a week to maintain the forces that are there to enforce this no-fly zone. The Tomahawk missiles that we've just fired off, 110 of them, $500,000 each. Each. So this kind of action will only reaffirm the United States as that indispensable country, the one that projects firepower. My other major area of concern is for what this will do to the Arab Spring that everyone's been talking about. We've been so excited to see these nonviolent uprisings throughout the Middle East and victories in Tunisia and Egypt. And let's be sure to talk about a key point here, the nonviolent aspect. One of the things that sets Libya off from the others that are continuing, Bahrain and Yemen, where their governments are firing on nonviolent demonstrators. In Libya, now this was their choice, but in Libya they chose to turn toward armed rebellion. This is a rebellion with tanks and heavy armaments, cannons, things like that. That was inevitably going to result in this warlike situation that we have now. So let's remember the lessons of the power of nonviolence, where dictators in Tunisia and Egypt have been toppled. And finally, as I wrap up, what we tend to forget is the rallying, Ben talked about patriotism. At the time the Afghanistan war started, there was a great deal of patriotic support for it. Same thing with the Iraq war. Not among all of us, for sure, but a majority of people in this country fully and patriotically supported both wars. Now, 59% of the people don't think that Iraq was worth fighting. Same thing in Afghanistan, where 64% of the American people don't think it was worth fighting. And the biggest lesson to remember that we tend to keep forgetting is that you cannot drop democracy on a country from F-16s. You cannot deliver democracy via Tomahawk cruise missile. It has never worked. It has never played out the way it's been promised, and it's never proven to be what it was advertised to be. These democratic Arab revolutions have to come from within. They have to maintain the ownership that they started to have. And our interference, our intervention, our war in this region again may derail an entire prospect for a new world in this region. Let's not forget. Thank you for the time.
So I haven't heard that much about the Libyan intervention, but one thing I did hear was that it was someone asked Obama during his press conference that it was kind of like so many civilians were dying, didn't we have a moral obligation to intervene and help because Gaddafi was killing civilians. It just kind of reminded me of the Holocaust and like just what happens when people say that you have a moral intervention, and what if war is the only way to intervene? What would you say to that?
Clearly, we would like to see these democracy movements throughout the Middle East succeed. In the situation in Libya, first of all, we don't know. I've been looking back through the press reports from the past couple of weeks since this got started. I cannot find any numbers of reported civilian deaths. Part of that is because Gaddafi is going out of his way to make it hard to get numbers for how many people have been killed. Second, a lot of analogies have been made to Rwanda and when Bill Clinton was in office, and we keep hearing that it's Bill Clinton's greatest regret that he didn't intervene in Rwanda. Let's be clear, whatever level of suffering is going on in Libya right now doesn't come close, not even close to Rwanda. Rwanda was a true genocide, which does obligate the world community to intervene. It is why the Clinton administration, when that was going on, ordered its diplomats not to use the word genocide because it would obligate us then to intervene. This is not a genocide in Libya. There is no legal or moral obligation, especially for a country 9,000 miles away, to go intervene. Now, we could argue that point a little bit, but the clear thing is that this is not a genocide. The other thing to keep in mind, I think is very important to keep in mind, is I referred to this while we were there. This has not been a nonviolent revolution in Libya as it was in Egypt and Tunisia and is ongoing in Bahrain and Yemen and Syria and Lebanon and all these other countries. Very early on, whole sections of the Libyan army defected and went over to the side of the rebellion. Where do you start drawing the line? These are people these are people in uniform who are fighting against the central government in tanks, with artillery. It's a very fuzzy line. It is so fuzzy that it is really hard to say where any kind of obligation, moral obligation, kicks in here. It would have to be expected that if you turn to using tanks and artillery in your revolution, that someone is going to shoot back at you. Now, in Egypt, now each of these is a different case, and you get on a little thin ice by trying to compare. But in Egypt, the night that the Egyptian government unleashed the thugs against the peaceful demonstrators in Tahrir Square, 300 people died in that one night. And we didn't hear the world saying we have a moral imperative to intervene there. They're shooting peaceful, nonviolent demonstrators in the center of Sana'a in Yemen and in Samana in Bahrain, very close allies of ours. Yemen being another place where the drones are working on a regular basis. So I just challenge the rush here. I challenge the definitions. It's clearly not a genocide. We mourn and regret and want to see an end to the loss of any civilian life. And that's my point, is that this kind of intervention, this kind of massive attack with cruise missiles and stealth bombers is guaranteed to cause more civilian suffering.